think I'm the only one standing between you and lunch. My job is to kind of pretty much summarize what has been just talked about all morning. And I must congratulate the Team Amravati, OBG Society, and the AMOGs for having selected such excellent speakers. I think I listened to almost all of them, and I feel very reassured that at least the fetuses in Maharashtra are well protected. Right? So, very well done, all of you. So here is what I'm just going to put all that you heard in perspective. So antenatal care pretty much aims to detect congenital anomalies, whether it's structural, whether it is chromosomal, signs of placental insufficiency, pretty much preeclampsia, growth restriction, preterm delivery and prematurity, in order to reduce your perinatal mortality or morbidity. So let's look at aneuploidies. We know about 500,000 kids are born with congenital malformations, and Down syndrome is the commonest chromosomal abnormality. And if you look at 21,000 Down syndrome per year, that means each of you has got one Down syndrome born every year, right? And if you have not seen it, you have missed it. It's as simple as that. Because not everybody comes back. Thalassemia major and sickle cell disease as well. So how do you diagnose? Diagnosis and screening of aneuploidies. As I told you, the only way you can diagnose Down syndrome or any chromosomal abnormality for that matter, to say whether yes it is there or no it is not there, is only by diagnostic tests, that is the invasive test, which carry a risk of miscarriage. In the first trimester, you do the first trimester screening. NT scan has got about a detection rate of about 75%. And of course, when you add on the serum screening, that improves to 90%. If you add NIPT, that's the best serum screening so far. It's 99%. Of course, currently the most viable option for us is to do a combined test. In the second trimester, the genetic sonogram, doing only the scan, will just detect only over half of the babies with chromosomal abnormalities. You add on the quad screening, that becomes 85%. Of course, you can do the NIPT in the second trimester as well. However, the best is combined test, that is a quadruple test with the genetic sonogram. And if you combine the two, we get up to 95%. Of course, when I talk about such high percentages, it goes without saying that every single test is performed in a standardized manner. So you got the NT according to the standard guidelines, you got the anomaly scan according to the standard guidelines, and you're doing the serum markers from accredited laboratories on the accredited platforms, and therefore you get to 95%. Anything which is not done well is better not done at all, right? So what do we do at the first trimester markers? We look at the crown rump length, which is a very important marker, of course, the nuchal translucency, the tricuspid regurgitation, and the ductus venosus, and we add the first trimester quadruple marker test. In the second trimester markers, there are a whole bunch of markers, and you already heard about them. I'm not going to go into the details of it. So let us do a first trimester risk assessment. So those of you who are lucky enough to have patients coming in the first trimester, you do a first trimester risk assessment. This is just again a proposal which is pretty much followed by majority of us. I'm just putting it again so that we go back with clear-cut messages from here. Risk is less than 1 in 1500. The possibility of chromosomal abnormality is pretty low. You do an ultrasound scan. There are no anomalies. You may or may not want to do a quadruple marker test. Definitely an anomaly scan at 18, 19 weeks. So by 20 weeks, that is halfway through the pregnancy, you know which way you're heading, and majority of them will be well. However, if the risk is more than 1 in 250, you see an anomaly. Would you do an NIPT in this? Come on, you need to answer this. No. Say that. You have to be categorical about what you're doing now, okay? So no, you would not do an invasive, you would not do an NIPT in this situation. If there are anomalies, you have to do an invasive test, because you need to know why this baby has got an abnormality. And we are not looking only at chromosomal, we are looking at genetic abnormalities as well. Of course, there is a procedure related risk. It depends who does the procedure. If today I go and do a Vardheim cystectomy, my mortality is 100%. But if I do an amniocentesis, my mortality is less than 1 in 1000, right? It depends who does it, right? So you need to choose the person wisely who does it, right? The person who does more, obviously the risk will be less, right? Then there are no anomalies, but your risk is high. Of course, then you can have the option of giving them the NIPT. And if it is high risk, you go on to do an invasive. If it is low risk or a low fetal fraction, which is less than, if it's a low fetal fraction, you would still need to do an invasive. But if it's low risk, you can be quite reassuring. Even if the risk is low, but you have an anomaly, in the low risk category, you would go for an invasive test. Basically, you have to trust your ultrasound, right? Ultrasound, you're seeing the problem. So what is the point in beating around the bush, trying to find something else in the blood and things like that? What you're seeing is what is real, right? So go on and get on with the invasive test. If you have a risk between 1 in 250 to 1 in 1500, now you can change that number 250 to 1500 to whatever suits your practice the best. This is my suggestion. If you have no anomalies, of course, you can go ahead with the NIPT or you can reassure them. But if you have anomalies, you go for invasive. So basically, a lot of it would be dependent upon what your anomaly scan is telling you in the first trimester itself. All right. So first trimester is indeed the best test because its accuracy is high. The time required to resolve or make sure the diagnosis, you have time on your hand. You're fortunate the time is there. You have got a good 4 to 6 weeks to resolve and take it to its logical conclusion. If you have no anomalies, you can continue doing the serum screening. The first trimester, you can add the second trimester quad. Definitely that improves the detection rate. And of course, it also helps you because the serum screening, because they are primarily placental based proteins and hormones, it will add on your information regarding placental dysfunction as well, and that is of course an added advantage in the first trimester as well. However, if you see anomalies, or if you see significant markers like ARSA, or you see an absent nasal bone, or you see a nuchal edema, then you know, or ventriculomegaly for that matter, you know these are important markers, and it's not just the chromosomes. You need to do probably a microarray as well. And because ARSA can be associated with 22q microdeletion too, so you need to look more than just chromosomes. Now, and of course, if it is normal, it's very reassuring. It will tell you if there is abnormality, it will tell you what is the chances of it happening again, because that's the next question coming your way. Okay, I terminate this pregnancy, this is bad, what about the next time round? And you will not have an answer if you have not tested that fetus. Right? It's as simple as that. You'll be straightforward lying to the patient. We don't want to lie to our patients, right? Management of future pregnancies becomes very, very important because we know that recurrence risk will vary depending upon what your primary problem is on the first place. Okay? Then comes the genetic opinion. Do not ever ignore your geneticists. They are a bundle of information. They're hugely helpful as a fetal medicine specialist, and I can't do without them. Absolutely. Now, next comes the structural problems. We know the baby is fully formed. By 11 weeks, the head, body, 2 hands, 2 legs is all formed. So if there's any major structural problems, we can see it at that stage. And this is target 9. 9 anomalies that you cannot afford to miss in the first trimester. And you must take a picture of this slide, right? In the head, you have acrania, that's the missing skull. You have encephalocele, there is a breach. There is a missing midline, that is your alobar holoprosencephaly. You have exomphalos and gastroschisis, which are anti-abdominal wall defects. You have iniencephaly, which is again a neural tube defect. You have megacystis, there's a huge big bladder. You have limb reductions because you will see all 3 parts of all the limbs in this stage itself, and of course the body stalk anomaly where the baby is literally hanging off from the placenta with a very short cord and has got multiple abnormalities. The second trimester scan, we have a genetic sonogram, which is one of the components. We look at the structure, including screening for cardiac defects, very, very important. We look at the uterine artery Doppler. We screen for preeclampsia and growth restriction. We look at the cervical length, preferably transvaginal, but at least certainly transabdominal. That will help us to screen for preterm delivery. We look at the amniotic fluid in the placenta. We look for vasa previa, because vasa previa is a bad situation. You need to look out. And of course, look at the amniotic fluid, because that will help you to assess the possibility of renal dysfunction and other gastrointestinal problems as well, and you arrange follow-up accordingly. So in the routine anomalies scan, you do it around 18-19 weeks. You arrange follow-up if there are markers, if there are defects, if the abnormal uterine artery Doppler, And of course, if there is an abnormal cervical length, because you need to decide whether you need to put in a stitch or preferably do a give them progesterone, because that actually changes the outcome of the pregnancy to a large extent. If you need to do an early anomaly scan, when would you do an early anomaly scan? Preferably around 16-17 weeks. And of course, there are certain indications, an intermediate risk, or if you are not sure, if you see something on the first trimester, you want to follow up. Anxious couple, there is a family history of previous defects, so you can see them around 16-17 weeks. What you would see at 19 weeks, you'll see at 16 weeks. What's so big difference? You have a good ultrasound machine, you know what to see, you will see it. You can always see them back again, but a good reassurance scan is very important. Remember, ultrasound scans, fetal scans is not only about finding problems. For a vast majority of the pregnancies, it's to tell the parents, hey, look, the baby looks all right. Go back and just enjoy the rest of the pregnancy, or come back after some time. Things are looking good at this stage, and we should not hesitate to say so, because that's our job too. Okay, so if there is, and follow up, generally if I see them at 16-17 weeks, I like to follow up 22-23 weeks, because I don't see a big difference that will happen between 16 and 19 weeks. So 22-23 weeks, because your uterine artery Doppler works better, your cervical screening works better at that point as well. So coming to preeclampsia and growth restriction, I've pretty much already talked about it, but I think we must look into doing a combined screen where, apart from the demographics, the historical factors, the previous pregnancy with preeclampsia or maternal hypertension or any other maternal disease, you add on the mean arterial pressure, the uterine artery Doppler, and the biochemical factors. And once you put them into an algorithmic approach, you give them aspirin, you can change the outcome of the pregnancy to a large extent. When you're doing your anomaly scan, reassess the uterine artery Doppler, and even at growth scan, reassess the uterine artery Doppler along with your biometry, and that would be really helpful. Now, people ask, screen positive for preeclampsia FGR after 20 weeks, what do you do? There is very little benefit from preeclampsia, as I already showed you in my previous talk. However, there is benefit because you monitor the mother and the baby much more closely, and patient education is very important, because you would tell them not to travel too much. You would tell them that, look, hey, if you have any headaches or visual disturbances, you come into the hospital sooner rather than later, or even for that matter, reduce fetal movements, because we know our mothers like to sit around for some time because a mother-in-law or mother said so. Don't go, this is not a good time to go, and things like that, okay? So patient education is very, very important. You can tell them to monitor the blood pressure at home. Weekly monitoring, home monitoring is very useful. And of course, you put them on serial growth scans. If 4 weekly, if all is going well, 3 weekly, if one parameter, an AFI is less, and 1 to 2 weekly if there is a Doppler anomaly as well. So simple mathematics here, you can actually categorize the care too. So coming to preterm delivery, cervical length, yes, you can check in first, second, third trimester as well, but remember, cervical length tends to shorten closer to the time of incidence, right? So checking the first trimester cervical length may not be very beneficial, because the effacement and things like that, or premature effacement, happens in the late second trimester or third trimester. So it's not a bad idea to keep checking the cervical length. Also, if not, as I said, transvaginally for every patient, but at least transabdominally look, and in suspicious cases or where there is a high risk situation, check them. And progesterone, good stuff. Suture, depends who does it again. And of course, there is a role of steroids in threatened preterm labor as well. The shorter the cervix, the chances goes up for preterm delivery. And of course, progesterone has shown to be beneficial by reducing significantly the risk of severe preterm delivery as well. So if your cervical length is between 1 to 15 millimeters, there is enough evidence there to start them on progesterone, vaginal progesterone, because it has got a local action as well, and all you need to give them is 200 milligrams vaginally in the night. That's all, so that they don't have discharge all day long. If you give them orally, remember, half of it goes into the liver, and they will start feeling sleepy and in a bad mood, and they'll have problems with their husbands, right? So don't do that, right? 200 milligrams vaginally, and has got local action as well, so you can avoid the systemic side effects as well. Well, if it's between 16 to 25 millimeters, still there is not much consensus. A word about multiple pregnancy. Very, very important to check your chorionicity and amnionicity in the first trimester. It must be checked. To report a twin pregnancy or a multiple pregnancy is not at all good enough. You need to tell me what is the chorionicity, what is the amnionicity, and the best time to do it is at 12 weeks. Fetal reduction, it reduces the risk of complications of prematurity, irrespective whether it is twins or triplets or singleton. We know twins, yes, twins are difficult and nobody can stop the preterm delivery, and predicting preterm delivery is very difficult. So if a couple want a reduction from twins to singleton, particularly in a dichorionic twins, why are we stopping that, right? Question yourself. You're not the one who's looking after the kids, it's they who is going to look after the kids. And if you want the child to have a good life with good set of parents who want to do something, then I think a conversation is very important, a dialogue is very important, rather than being shut off to some crazy options. Monochorionic pregnancies from 16 weeks. Once you diagnose monochorionic pregnancy at 12 weeks, from 16 weeks, you have to monitor them every 2 weeks. If there is no discrepancy in amniotic fluid, discrepancy in size, discrepancy in the middle cerebral artery Doppler, and they need to be monitored if every 2 weeks if there is no discrepancy, every week if there is discrepancy. And of course, we know the incidence of cardiac abnormalities or any abnormalities for that matter is more in multiple pregnancy, and therefore you need to possibly add in a fetal echo as well. But if you do good cardiac screening, I don't see really much point in doing fetal echo for every pregnancy unless you're suspicious of something in the heart as well. Okay, so serial growth scans in dichorionic every 4 weeks. If there is no discrepancy, 1 to 3 weekly, depending upon what discrepancy you find, if there is so. Of course, if there are no complications, take them to 38 weeks and deliver them. What is the big rush, right? Let them take the babies home with them. Why do you want to give more work for the neonatologists? Let the neonatal unit be busy with the kids that really need to be there. Because we know we cannot have a 100-bedded neonatal unit. We have 5 to 10 bedded. Let those beds be only for those special babies, right? That's how you can really optimize the care as a team, right? So here we are looking for best outcomes for the mother and baby. We need to optimize antenatal care, and that is possible by inverting the pyramid of care, which we already heard about. We need to give accurate information based on the evidence that is available and what we are practicing. Of course, local situations would vary, and we need to facilitate delivery in optimal environment. And if that means there is an in utero transfer, so be it. Let it be an in utero transfer, because at the end of the day, what matters or what should matter to every obstetrician is that you have a healthy baby and a healthy mom at the end of it. So to summarize, early pregnancy scan at 7 to 9 weeks, you check the viability, locate the placenta, make sure it's in the right place. Yes, chorionicity very good. Make sure you have an image of that. At the first trimester scan, you look at the viability, you again check the chorionicity, amnionicity, you screen for aneuploidies, you screen and diagnose certain birth defects, you screen for preeclampsia, pre-FGR, you add on the first trimester quadruple test. First trimester quadruple test is your double marker test along with PLGF and AFP. AFP helps you to assess the risk for not only neural tube defects but for fetal growth restriction also better. Second trimester anomaly scan, you look at the growth, you look at the amniotic fluid, placenta, structural survey, the genetic sonogram, uterine artery, Doppler, cervical length. Add on your second trimester quadruple marker test. Easy to remember, first trimester quad, second trimester quad, right? And of course your routine growth scan, we already heard about it. No harm doing it at 34 weeks, because if you not only pick up the early growth restrictions, but you actually screen for your late growth restrictions, and if you have any evolving anomaly, it's much easier to do an anomaly scan at 34 weeks than to do at 36 weeks, because that baby, it finds it difficult to turn. And of course, follow up you arrange according to your findings, and this will ensure that you have an optimal outcome for a healthy baby and healthy mother, which is what we are all here for, right? So to me, every fetus deserves to be screened for all possible complications, and there's no better day than on a Valentine's Day to take this oath for all of us, right? So thank you very much, and I'd just like to put one more slide up. For those of you who are really interested in taking up fetal imaging to another level, we do have courses and our next gynae courses as well, and an ultrasound course we have online as well. as well as on-site, and we are going to be starting the next one in June, in the month of May, and we hope that we will have Pune or Mumbai or even Nagpur for that matter as one of our centers as well. So because this is all done in Samsung offices, so it is highlighted everywhere. Thank you very much.